You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. This is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there are these things that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. As always, for 16 years, 2300 episodes, we bring in the Chris Voss Show. Just the most amazing minds of people and people sharing their wonderful stories. And then some idiot with a mic. It must be me. Anyway, we have an amazing young lady on the show today. She's going to be talking to us about her new book that's coming out, or just came out today. Congratulations, Susan. We have Susan Meissner on the show, and her new book is called A Map to Paradise. And we're going to be getting into some of the deets, as the kids like to say. The kids don't like to say that. That's not really true. I just made that up. Susan is a USA Today best-selling novelist with more than 1 million books in readers' hands in 18 languages. Wow. Her critically acclaimed award-winning works of historical fiction have been named to numerous lists, including Publishers Weekly, annual roster of 100 best books, library reads, top picks, okay, and Real Simple annual tally of best books, books list top 10 book of the month, and Amazon's editor pick. Her newest title is A Map to Paradise, a novel about belonging, friendship, and finding one's way home, and is set in California during the early and scary years of the Cold War. She lives in Pacific Northwest with her husband and yellow lab, Winston. Welcome to the show. How are you, Susan?
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy. Today's a great day. It's launch day for the new book. I'm excited for it to be out in the big wide world.
Congratulations. How many books do you have in print now?
I think we're at 23.
Good job. Wow. That's amazing. I'm still working to get one out or two out.
It's never too late. Never too late to give it a go.
It took 54 years to get the first one out, or 52 years. At 102, I'll put out my second book. Anyway, congratulations on that, Susan, and your launch date today. Give us any .coms, any social media you want people to follow you up.
Sure. I'm easy to find on the web, SusanMeissnerAuthor.com, on Instagram, Susan Meissner Author, and on Facebook at Susan.Meissner. So those are the places you'll find me.
So give us the 30,000 overview. What's in the new book, A Map to Paradise?
So it is a book set in the Cold War. The early years, they were actually rather scary years. People think of the 1950s as kind of happy years that were full of great fashions, great cars, excellent music. But they were also years of great fear because the Cold War was new. It was scary. Everybody knew we had the bomb, and everybody now knew that USSR had the bomb too. So everybody was afraid of the bomb. Yeah. And McCarthyism was real. It was rampant. It touched places like Hollywood, of all places, which really surprised me that there would be a witch hunt for communists in Hollywood. But there was. And there were also 1 million displaced people after World War II ended. That was also part of the mix of the 1950s. And so this book kind of marries those two things together. The witch hunt for communists in Hollywood, and the fact that there were these millions of displaced people. And so I bring some characters together that are experiencing some of those things, and they all get together on a cul-de-sac in Malibu.
It all comes together in a cul-de-sac in Malibu. Sounds like the intro to the TV show.
I like that idea.
They were all vagabonds according to the Hollywood blacklist, and so they met on a road on, I don't know, I can't do it right. Yeah. Anyway, this was an interesting time. McCarthyism, the Hollywood blacklist. And so tell us about your main character.
So it's kind of a cast of three. They kind of share the weight of the book, but people might think of Melanie Cole, the actress who's blacklisted, as kind of the lead in this book, if you will. She only ever wanted to be a movie star. She had just made her big break and was like headed for superstardom. And then she's blacklisted by guilt by association. She's not a communist. She's not even sure what one thinks. She wasn't paying attention to that in high school. But she's connected with somebody who was also on the blacklist. And back then, that's all it took. If you were on familiar terms, if you will, with somebody on the blacklist, then you were an easy target. So she's hiding out in Malibu, trying to wait it out. She wants her career back. It doesn't look very good. And she's also kind of licking her wounds. It's a hard time for her. And Malibu is a paradise, right? It's beautiful. It's ruggedly beautiful, but it's not paradise for you if that's not where you want to be. And yeah.
And no one wants to talk to you, associate with you because you're blacklisted.
Right.
I mean, it destroyed a lot of people, that blacklisting thing. We need more politicians in this world that will actually say to each other, "Have you no decency, sir?" So what gave you the idea behind the proponent of the book? And is this a new standalone story where the characters aren't continued from something else?
Yeah, pretty much all of my books are that way. You can pick up any book anytime and not have to worry about any of that. They each are their own story. And I guess what interested me is for the last decade, we've had some excellent World War II books. I mean, a lot. Many, and they're wonderful and they all deserve to be here. But I wondered if maybe people were wondering what happened after that. You know, what happened after the war? It was a rather definitive moment for humankind, and how are we changed by World War II? And you look to the 1950s, and you can see this is how we were changed. The Cold War was a war, but it wasn't like the one we had just fought. And, you know, we were allies with Russia in World War II, and now we're not. And, you know, now Russia has become the USSR, and they have all these countries. They're huge. They are a menacing threat. And people were unsure of we don't know what to make of this. We don't know, is there going to be a takeover? And are there people right here in our neighborhood, you know, who have these, you know, subversive thoughts? And are they going to, you know, help usher in a communist takeover? I know it sounds crazy to think that was going through people's minds, but it was. And the fact that it happened in Hollywood, I just thought it was so interesting, because Hollywood is, it's not higher education, it's Hollywood. You know, it's the dream factory, right?
Dream factory, yeah.
But back then that's where social commentary came from. We didn't have Facebook, we didn't have podcasts. The way we found out how people were thinking and what mattered to people was through the theater and the cinema. And, you know, I guess it makes sense that people were looking to Hollywood, because that's where people were writing and producing thought pieces in the form of movies and television shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that there were all these displaced people too, that interested me for the same reason. It was a huge humanitarian crisis. And to be displaced, there were 800 DP camps in Germany alone after the war, and 11 million displaced persons. And at the end of it, there were 1 million that could not go back home. It was just not an option for them. It meant returning now to an Eastern Bloc country. And if you had been brought over as forced labor for the Reich, you were not welcome back home. And if you did go back home, you could face arrest or deportation to a gulag. And the United States brought in 400,000 DPs over a period of 4 years. And so one of my characters is one of those people.
That's pretty interesting. So tell us about you. When did you first know you were a writer? And, you know, how did you get into the business, as it were, throughout the course of your life growing up?
Yeah, you know, I think I've always been driven to write my thoughts down. My mom says when I was little, I was making up poems in the back of the car before I could even write, you know, before I even know how to form letters on paper. I was making up poems in the backseat of the car. So it's always been part of my DNA. And, you know, all throughout school, even elementary school, I was writing little stories and poems. I still have those. They're awful. But what they tell me is that I've just always, it's like an itch that had to be scratched my whole life.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I graduated from high school, I didn't know that you could make what you love your career and still love it. I think I was of the mindset that if I made writing my career, that I wouldn't have an escape. I wouldn't have a place to go when I wanted to get away from work. And I know now that you can definitely do what you love, and you can still have hard days, of course, but at the end of the work week, you still love what you do. And it took me a while to figure that out, but I finally did. And then I got my first job working at a newspaper. And that's how I got my foot in the writing world, where you actually do it for a living, was writing for a newspaper. Yeah. And that was a great way to start, actually. I learned how to be brief. I learned how to grab readers early. And I learned how to keep to a deadline. And all of those things are helpful now that I'm writing novels. And then my first novel I wrote in my 40s, and I've never looked back. It's my lane. It's where I was meant to be all along.
I'm glad you found it, and so are probably a lot of your readers that are out there in the forums. So how did you get your first gig? How did you land your first gig at writing your first book, or someone paying for one of your first books to be written?
Yeah, that was 20 years ago. It's a lot different now. I didn't have an agent. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any connections. This is before, it's before Google or any people. The only way to be discovered really was being in the right place at the right time and all the stars align.
Wow.
And I had written a book, and a small publishing house in Oregon picked it up, and I was just grateful to have a place. I'm grateful that they did, because I kind of cut my teeth on my first novels. They're no longer in print, and I'm okay with that. I was really kind of finding my way. And I was actually learning how to write by writing. They're not terrible books by any means, but I feel like what I'm writing now is a whole lot more insightful. And I think I bring more to the table now that I've been at it for 20 years. But I just got lucky. I got published without an agent, and that probably happens less frequently now, but it did happen back then.
Yeah, everyone's publishing books nowadays. In fact, the AI thing has made it worse.
Oh, yeah.
The AI books that are trying to flood the systems.
Yeah.
Now, I lived through this era of terror. It was in the 50s, post-war, but, I grew up in the early 70s. I was born in 68. And so I went to school doing the nuclear drill, where you would climb under your steel desk, hoping that would save you from a nuclear bomb. And so we lived in fear of Russia.
Yeah.
Right? That's what makes things really hard nowadays in 2025. But, we lived in fear of Russia. Communism was bad. And, you were, even then in the 70s, we were worried about Russia and communist influence. And yeah, you kind of live with this mindset that you could, life could end at any moment with a nuclear war. And it seemed very imminent. We were just shy of the Bay of Pigs and John F. Kennedy in the crisis at Cuba. And so I lived through that. What do you like about historical fiction? What is it that draws you to it? Because you do a lot of books in that format.
I do. Yeah, I kind of came to it in 2008 with my 9th book, I believe. I had an idea for a historical fiction dual timeline book. And when I wrote that book, it brings in the Salem witch trials. I found that, I loved that. I loved the research. I loved going back into the past from the safety of my living room. And I think the past teaches us. It's a tutor. It shows us what we value. It shows what we're afraid of. It shows what we're willing to do when we're afraid. It shows us what we're all about. What are we willing to go to the mat for? Mm-hmm. And I think all of our best lessons are in the past too. And historical fiction keeps it alive. There are a lot of people that aren't going to sit down and read an 800-page nonfiction work on what the Cold War was like, but they'll pick up a novel and read about it. And if I've done my job and given the reader an accurate view of what it was like to live in 1956 in Southern California, then I've taken them back to the past. They can experience it in a great way because it is safe. It is time travel that is safe. And you can visit it and view it and feel it. And any lessons that we picked up from that time, they can be yours as a viewer. And I think that's its best value, really. Only historical fiction can do that. It can take you to the past and show you the past.
Yeah, it has that pre-built construct of scenery, I guess, as it were.
Yeah.
And can give you the backdrop. And there's lots of historical fiction authors we've had on the show. And it's always interesting because they can take stuff and fill in some of the blanks sometimes on some stories that there wasn't a lot of data on, but they can kind of flesh them out and, make their own narrative around it or their own sort of story around it. But it's interesting writing stories. When you develop your characters, do they just come to you? Do they start talking to you? How does that usually work for you?
Yeah, that is a nut to crack. That is. I almost feel like a hack every time I begin a new novel because that part of it is the most difficult because my characters are not real. I don't take a historic figure from our past and build a story around that person. I would love to do that. I'm not sure I ever will. It's not my shtick, but creating somebody out of nothing is a lot of work, and I want to get it right. I want you to believe these characters really did exist, even though they're figments of my imagination. So I do something that I'm not afraid to share with people, and that is I give them the Enneagram test. So I will pretend I am Melanie Cole, this actress who's just been blacklisted, and I'll take the Enneagram test as if I'm her.
Oh, really?
And if all of my characters end up with my number, I'm a 2, wing 3, then I know I haven't taken the test well, because they can't all be me. They've got to be their own people. And I don't want people thinking that's the same character she had in her last book. And I'll take it until I feel like I have a good handle on how this person thinks, because your Enneagram number, I don't know if you know about the Enneagram.
No, tell us what that is for people.
Yeah, I think it far outdates Myers-Briggs, for example. But it's a way of dialing into your personality traits. Wow. And there are some traits that show up a lot, and so you can build a personality profile with that number. Like a 2, like me, we're helpers, we're empathetic, we want people to be happy, and everything that's good about us is also our downfall, because somebody who wants others to be happy can often, you can't please everybody all the time, and that can be your downfall. And you can be too empathetic and insert yourself into someone's trouble when they don't need it. They don't need your insertion into their life. And so there are good things and bad things about all the Enneagram numbers. And like, for example, a 1, they're more perfectionists. And I'm really glad there are 1s out there, because they keep the world spinning, right? But they can also have their downfalls too. A 1 can be very hard-nosed. They can be inflexible. They can be a little hard to work with. And there are lots of free Enneagram tests out there. I use the free one. There's many. You could just Google it and have some fun with it. But you'll find that once you find your number, it pretty much stays with you. Even if you find a different test and take a different one, you'll find that you probably are going to end up with the same number, because who you are is who you are.
Who you are is who you are. Yeah, I took one of those tests one time. I got a -4.
That would be fun. That would be fun. Yes. There should be like a little thing about the negative Enneagram numbers.
You have 0 personality. But, I hear that from dates all the time, so it's fine. I'm thinking maybe I should send them the Enneagram test so I can find out who I'm dating. So for those of the audience who are listening to this, it's spelled ENNEAGRAM if you're trying to figure out how to spell Enneagram. Some of my first guesses were with an I, but yeah, check out the personality test. Anything coming up that you're working on, maybe teasing out that you want to tease out? Any future books you're working on?
Yeah, the one I'm working on now is set in the 1960s, which, if you can believe, that is now historical fiction. Which is a little hard to understand. It's just hard to grasp, because I was born in the 60s, and now my birth decade is considered historical fiction. But anything 50 years or older is considered within the realm of historical fiction. So yes, we have a whole new set of books probably coming out that are set in the 60s, because it's considered fair game for historical fiction. But this one, I don't have a title for it yet, and I'm just writing it right now. So it's a little ethereal. The characters are still kind of floating above my head, and I'm trying to lasso them and have them come down and talk to me. But it's set during the year before we landed on the moon. So we're looking at 1968, which was a horrible year. It was a really tough year. 68 was. That was the year of the Tet Offensive. It was the year of the 2 assassinations, Dr. Martin Luther King and RFK, and the campus riots and protests. It was a tough year all around. Yeah. And then people they needed hope. They needed something to look up for, and so we had the Apollo missions, which in July of 1969, it's like we kind of broke open this, almost like this cloistered oppression that we were feeling on our planet by bursting out of it and landing on the moon. And it made us all look up. And I think there's something within us that longs for the transcendent. And so this book is kind of all about that. It's characters who need to look up. They're experiencing some hard times, and you can't always change your circumstances, but you can change how you look at them. And they just need to look up. They need to find something to be hopeful for. And the lead up to the moon is what that book is. That's the setting for it.
It was a difficult time back then.
Yeah.
The big earthquake in 70 and 68 was a nightmare. I was born. I think I caused
Oh
it.
yeah, you were born
I was
that year.
born in- right.
Thing that happened.
Yeah, that was the one good thing that happened.
One good thing.
But I was born in January, so I probably brought everything. It was my fault. I have a -4 personality. It's a problem. I'm just that kid who shows up and they go, "Who are you?" And I go, "Oh, my name's Damien." I was born in 68. Get ready for some shit. Give us your final thoughts and pitch out to people to order the book, get to know you better on social media, any.coms, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me at susanmeissnerauthor.com, and my book is available wherever you buy your books. I encourage you to patronize your independent bookstore, and if you don't have one near you, then go to bookshop.org. They actually give back to independent bookstores. You can support bookstores that way. And if you're an audio book reader, it's on audio. And if you love ebooks, you can find it on all your digital platforms. And if you are a member of a book club, I always invite book club people to get in touch with me. And if I can pop in and visit with you while you are discussing my book, I'm happy to do that for free. Just reach out to me and we can try and make it happen.
You'll keep these millions of readers happy, and I'm glad you found a thing that you excel at. And storytellers are just the greatest people in the world, in our world, because they keep us, they keep us entertained, they keep us educated. There's things you learn from these different stories and lessons. Stories are the fabric of life, really.
Oh yeah, well said. Thank you for saying that. It's absolutely true.
You got it. And we need to read more books, people. I've seen some
absolutely,
of you on social
yes,
media.
do it.
You need to read some shit.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm like shaming my audience at this point. You're gonna read some shit or else. Don't make me come over. Don't make me pull this podcast car over, folks, and come back there. Stop touching each other. Order up her book, Susan's book, wherever you find books are sold. It's out March 18th, 2025. It is called A Map to Paradise. Thank you, Susan, for coming on the show. Thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out. Great show.